Our top story tonight, the Fed chair nominee, Kevin Warsh, called on the central bank to shrink its balance sheet during the confirmation hearings that took place. Warsh suggested that the Fed's bond buying spree mainly helped Americans with financial assets. He said monetary policy is best set through interest rates, and he suggested that central bankers hold fewer news conferences.
If you ask me my true personal opinion, right now, Fed chairs and other central bankers around the FOMC, they speak quite frequently. There is no lack of transparency. But I would say this, I think truth-seeking is more important than repetition. And if one has a press conference, one wants to deliver some important news.
Perfect.
So
and
I
to
would
follow up on that, then, would you commit to taking questions at those press conferences?
If a press conference were held, I think it would be incumbent to hear what the reporters of the day had in mind.
Richard Clarida is the Fed's vice chair under Jerome Powell. Richard's with me now. What do you make of it? I don't want us to get bogged down in, is he going to do Trump's business or not? Because I think most sensible people believe that, he's a man of his own mind, and that's going to go forward. But there are philosophical issues with Warsh on things like forward guidance and monetary policy.
There are. And, Kevin has been consistent. I credit him with that since leaving the Fed. He's been critical of quantitative easing, the balance sheet expansion, and he has been critical on forward guidance, which was a real emphasis of the Bernanke, Yellen, and Powell Fed, and actually went further than I expected today in terms of not committing to continue to do the regular press conferences. I think the important point to know is, there is a First Amendment, and so Reserve Bank presidents and governors can give, and I think will continue to give speeches. And so the real question is not was communication from the governors and presidents. The real question is how will Kevin Warsh shape his communication with markets and the public?
You see, the problem with not liking QE is that there's a very strong argument that says QE saved the ship from sinking. When you go back to those days, that was the bond buying method was the only way to get rates lower.
Well, thank you for that, Richard. I mean, important for your viewers to know, as Kevin knows, is that the two main episodes in which the Fed's balance sheet expanded were the global financial crisis and during the 2020 COVID pandemic collapse. I think perhaps a more nuanced critique is not to criticize the use of the balance sheet in those episodes, but the fact that the Fed maintains a very large balance sheet and did not really shrink it to Kevin's satisfaction in the 2010s. And then obviously the Powell Fed since the pandemic collapse. And he actually gave more insight today than we've heard from him on his approach. He seems focused on shrinking the balance sheet from here and moving it to holding more short-dated securities.
What about this idea also, back to monetary policy? He doesn't believe that the Fed, there's a lot of the Fed research taking into climate control, climate change, taking diversity, other issues which in a strict definition of monetary policy would not be part of it. He thinks they should be put aside. That's not the job of the Fed.
Well, my own sense, I was there from 2018 to 2022. The Powell Fed was labor focused on supporting the economy. The economy is in a very good place in January of 2020, and then supporting the economy with the pandemic collapse. And so I think it would be an exaggerated critique to say that the focus got diverted by those other issues.
Last thing I just want to talk about, away from the war, in your role, Global Economic Advisor at PIMCO, how much economic trouble are we in, we being however you want to define it, the world, the Western world, how much economic trouble are we in at the moment as a result of the war in Iran, the straits being closed, and the oil price shock?
Well, let's start with, it is a very big shock. The IEA said it's potentially the biggest shock to the global energy market ever. I think historically, And you've seen the IMF and other forecasters based upon what we know now. And importantly, Richard, based upon where the oil futures markets say the oil market's going to be, it looks like a big shock, but one that is manageable, that shouldn't tip the global economy into a recession. However, the longer this lasts and the more uncertainty there is about safe passage through the strait and the future approach that Iran may take to controlling the strait, then this then has a cumulative effect over time. But so right now, based upon what we know and what the oil traders expect, it looks to be manageable. But the longer it goes on, then the more of a concern it is. It's a classic textbook stagflationary shock. It'll slow growth and push up, at least for some time, inflation.
And the problem with a stagflationary shock is, what do you do with monetary policy to bring it back to full circle?
Right.
Because a stagflation, by definition, either movement will hit the other side really badly.
Exactly. Right. So if you cut rates to support the labor market, inflation may move up. If you raise rates to try to lower inflation caused by a supply shock, you can really create a very, very significant economic downturn, which is why the first inclination of modern central bankers is to look through an adverse supply shock that pushes up energy prices. But everyone has read the textbook, and I began my career as a student in the 70s. That did not work out well in the 70s. Oil went from $3 to $10 to $20 to $30 a barrel. And so that was like a tripling in oil prices in a decade. And central banks fell behind the curve, and the inflation genie got out of the bottle. And so that's why they're very closely and carefully looking at measures of inflation expectations.
On that final point, if you're going to get rid of forward guidance, what are you going to replace it with?
Well, see, that's the $64,000 question. And speaking of genies out of the bottle, I think it may be difficult, more difficult than maybe soon-to-be Chairman Warsh believes, to put forward guidance back on the shelf. Now, let me stipulate, it's entirely possible to run a successful monetary policy without a lot of forward guidance. I don't want to say zero. There's always been winks and nods. But Volcker and Greenspan, for most of his years, ran policy with very little forward guidance. But we've had a forward guidance regime in place in the U.S. and globally now for really 25 years. And it'll be a shock, or would be a shock to markets, if Warsh really is serious about eliminating forward guidance. And that's why it'll be important to see what he does in terms of the Fed communication around press conferences and economic projections.
Richard, thank you so much for joining us. It's exactly what we wanted to talk about tonight. I'm very grateful to you. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you,
Clarida.
sir.
Thank you. Now,